Now that we know how to convert our layers into 3D layers in After Effects, let's talk about cameras. Now, cameras inside of After Effects aren't physical, real cameras, but they act just like it. Virtual cameras in After Effects are amazing. And it could just be my own bias as a video producer by trade that I love having this kind of access. But the ability to control and keyframe a virtual camera through your composition, making your 3D layers come to life, is a wonderfully fun thing to do. So in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make a camera and then how to control that camera to make your 3D layers come to life. To teach you about cameras in After Effects, I've given you a PSD file of a hillside scene that I designed. Go ahead and download that now, and let's import that into After Effects as a composition. To do that, I'm going to double click in my project panel, find my PSD, and then click Import. Again, it's going to ask you what kind of import kind you want. So let's change this to composition, not footage. Composition, hit OK. This gives us a folder of all of our layers in the PSD, and it gives us our composition. Go ahead and double click the hillside composition, and let's open that in our timeline. So here's the scene. A bunch of different 2D layers, all listed out here in the timeline panel. What I want to do is I want to turn each of these into a 3D layer. Distribute them throughout Z-space, and then create a camera to kind of fly through this hillside scene. To start, let's go ahead and turn everything but the sky into a 3D layer. To do this quickly for multiple layers, you can click and drag your mouse through multiple checkboxes. Now visually, nothing changed. But if I come down to my view pull down, change this to 2 views horizontal, I can now start to distribute these layers in Z-space. I'm going to zoom out here to give me some more room. Now I want my front hill to be at the very front. So I'm going to drag this forward a bit, and then I'll grab my Y axis and drag it up. I'm going to keep my hill light, which is this one here. I'm going to keep this where it's at, kind of dead center in the composition. I'm going to take my hill left and hill dark right, and I'm going to push these back. Don't panic if it starts to go behind different things. Because again, because these are 3D, we can easily start to change the layer order in Z-space. I'm going to push these back a bit. Good. And then I'm going to take my mountain left and mountains right and push these back even further. Now you'll notice an issue here. The boundaries of our layers, since we're pushing them back in Z-space and the layers get smaller, we start to see the boundaries of our layer. And this is an issue because we don't want to see the boundaries of our layers. And this is where we can start to scale things up to compensate for this. So for my hill dark right and left, I'm going to select both, hit S on the keyboard, and I'm going to scale these up. Now I'm scaling. I'm not moving them closer, so they're just getting bigger, thereby keeping their look the same. I kind of like my mountain left and mountain right the size they are, but I am going to distribute them a little differently. I'm going to grab my X-axis here and move the left one over, and grab my Y-axis and move it up a little bit. And that looks pretty good. So now I have some dimensionality to my image, but by and large, it looks the same. Now, before I go any further, I want to animate the sun in this scene. So I'm going to click on my sun layer. I'm going to push it way back, even behind these mountains. I like the size of it here, but if you wanted to make it a little bigger, you could easily scale it up. Now I want to make this sun kind of rotate in the sky as if it were like kind of like a time lapse of the sun rising. So I'm going to grab my pan behind tool, my anchor point tool, and select the sun layer. And then I'm going to grab the anchor point. I'm going to drag it down here. This will allow it to rotate. If I get out my rotation, I can grab my Z rotation. And you can see now the sun will rotate in the sky around that anchor point. So at 0 seconds, I'm going to start the Z rotation at like -26. Start a keyframe. Come over to the, 3-second mark and make this do its full rotation. That's a little fast. I'll drag this last keyframe out to the 5-second mark. Good. Now I want to introduce you to cameras. Let's go ahead and go up to Layer, New, and come down to Camera. Now, this camera settings dialog box will look fairly daunting, especially if you're not really familiar with what camera terms mean. Things like focal length, area of view, zoom, and depth of field, those will kind of be foreign terms to you. I'm not really concerned with these right now, though. I want us to create a basic 2-node camera that's opposed to a 1-node camera, and I'll explain the difference once we create this. So I want to create a 2-node camera. We can keep it called Camera 1. And to make sure that my camera is the same as yours, let's come up to the preset here and let's set this to 50 millimeters. A 50 millimeter lens is a very standard lens, and so by choosing 50 millimeters, we create a fairly neutral camera. For those of you that do know cameras, the fact that we can change the sensor size, we can change the focal length, we can change the angle of view, we can change the zoom, we can even allow depth of field. The fact that we have these properties available to us in our virtual cameras in After Effects really, truly gives us a virtual camera with all the settings that we've come to know and love on our real cameras. So a 2-node, 50 millimeter camera called Camera 1, keep everything else the same and hit OK. Now this creates our virtual camera. It creates it as a layer down here. I'm going to drag this to the very top, called Camera 1. And we can see now the physical camera inside of our top view. If I zoom in here and navigate to this little rectangle, this is the actual camera, this little rectangle here. And this large triangle off of it is the field of view. Now it's called the 2-node camera because we have the camera as 1 node, and then we have this point of interest, which is node number 2. A 1-node camera is just a camera with a field of view, no point of interest. 1-node cameras are much more difficult to control, although they do have their place. But to start, focus on learning a 2-node camera first. Now, I want to point out that cameras don't have any type of mode, track mat, or switches. So we can't make a camera 3D. Cameras inherently are 3D. And we want to make sure that all of our layers that we want our camera to impact are turned into 3D layers. So our sky is not turned into a 3D layer, which is fine because I don't want the sky to have any sort of Z-space. The sky just needs to exist. When you move your camera, when you're driving, the sky never gets closer to you. It always remains at infinity. So by keeping the sky a regular 2D layer, it won't be impacted by our camera controls. Also, if I select my camera, I have most of the keyframeable properties that I know and love: position and rotation. Now I can't scale a camera and I can't change the transparency of a camera, but I can move it and rotate it. Now I also have the actual physical camera here inside of my composition panel. If I get out my selection tool, I can physically grab one of these axes or the physical pink box, if I were to zoom in here, and I can start to move this around. And when I start to move this around, notice several things. I know your eyes are drawn to the active camera to the right, but look at my point of interest in my top view here. It's stationary. So you can see how the camera is always locked on that point of interest. That's why 2-node cameras are handy. Now go ahead and look over at the active view. Notice what we did here. We're starting to actually see Z-space. We can see our layers distributed across that space. And we can move our camera around and notice that. But that's not all too different from our orbit around tool that we learned in the previous tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and hit Ctrl-Z to return my camera to its starting point. Now I want this camera to slowly push in, which means we're going to animate it through Z-space. To do this, I'm going to hit P on my keyboard. I'm going to start my keyframe stopwatch for position at 0 seconds. I'm then going to drag my playhead forward to the 5-second mark, and I'm going to push my camera through Z-space. And I could do that either with my Z-axis down here, or I could grab the physical Z-axis in my composition panel. I'm more of a visual learner. I like grabbing the actual axis handle. I'm going to push this through. Now, because we gave our layers depth, there should be a kind of parallax effect happening here, meaning as it's pushing, the more distant mountains are advancing slower than the front hill. Notice that if I push too far, it will literally go through layers. And that's not really what we want to do. It's kind of like in those old video games, if you kind of push through a wall, you'd see like the back end of a mountain, it would look all weird. We don't want to do that. So if we need to, we want to move the camera. Now, this is where camera movement can get a little tricky. We have our motion path here, and we can actually add splines and curves to this camera path by grabbing these handles. And this means now that the camera is going to move uniquely. It's going to follow that curved path, which I kind of like, kind of snakes around. And notice how our sun is doing its thing back there. That's why we animated it first. You can always animate after you've added a camera, but it can be a little weird because your point of view changes. So I always like animating when it's flat. Now by moving straight, I'm hitting this kind of large green hump right here. I want the camera to avoid that, which means I need my camera then at its last keyframe to move over on the x-axis, to move to the side. So I'm going to take this and drag it to the left a little bit. But I can start to see the bottom of the layer boundary of my mountains, and I don't like that either. To fix this, I could do one of two things. I can move the whole camera down a little bit on the y-axis, or I could move my actual mountain layer and readjust. Either work, it really just depends on how attached you are to the current layout that you see in your active camera view. We have to be careful though, and this is something that's hard about two-node cameras. When I moved that last keyframe and I moved the X value over, it kind of starts the camera off in a weird position at the starting keyframe, even though I never changed the data here. Cameras are notoriously wiggly. If you start to adjust one thing, it changes it somewhere else. And this is something that null objects are going to fix in the next tutorial. But for now, we want to make sure that then we compensate and we drag the camera to a good starting point. If you need to, you can adjust the rotation a little bit. The x-axis rotates up and down, the y-axis rotates side to side like a pan, and the x-axis is going to make you do a barrel roll.
Do a barrel roll!
So I'm going to adjust my pan, I'm going to move the y rotation over a little bit, and move all my layers over just a hair, and now that's realigned. So now when I come back to my position, I can start to see that mountain boundary, so I am indeed going to grab it and actually bring it down. So that looks pretty cool. And that's the basics of cameras. Cameras allow us to move through, using keyframes, a 3D space. And all we're doing is we're traversing Z-space. If I change my top view here to be right, we can actually see then the camera traversing through the space. And we can see the layers that it's hitting as it's going. Now, if you ever wanted to change the settings of a camera, you can click on the camera in the timeline panel and come up to Layer, and then select Camera Settings. And then our Camera Settings dialog box pops up, and you can change anything about this. Now, we're not going to, but just know that you can. If I hit Cancel and come down to my actual camera, and then toggle the layer down twice, we start to see a Camera Options toggle down, which also gives us most of the settings in our dialog box, but as keyframeable options. So I can indeed turn on depth of field. If I do this, I can start to change the focus distance. And notice how the camera inside of my right view, we start to see the focus distance changing. So by decreasing this, I can change the focal plane of the camera's lens. And then I can change the actual aperture. Now, unlike most cameras where the aperture is measured in f-stops, ours is measured now in pixels. The smaller this is, the sharper things are. The larger this is, the more blurry things become. So now as the camera's moving, layers will come in and out of focus as it moves. And I can keyframe my focal distance, effectively racking focus as I go. So here is my front hill. I can keyframe my focus distance here. And I could rack focus over the course of 5 frames to my mountain back. And now the lens literally racks focus over the course of 5 frames. Depth of field goes a long way in making your 3D animations inside of After Effects feel more cinematic, because cameras have depth of field. As your camera gets closer to things, you have to change the focal distance of the lens, otherwise things will go in and out of focus. And so adding depth of field and playing with these different settings, the aperture, the blur level, even the shape of the iris, these are all things that can make your cameras more robust. Now, we're not going to be delving into the depths of the camera settings in this class. Those of you that know cameras, these settings might be a bit more comfortable to change. Those of you that don't, feel free just to play with these and develop a cool look. We won't be using things like depth of field in this class, but if this is the only tutorial you watch with cameras in After Effects, I want you to be aware of these settings. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my depth of field, toggle up my camera, and now I have a nice moving scene through Z space, adding a lot of depth to my previously 2D layers.